Oh, I'm turning it over to my good friend, Rachael. There she is. Sorry. Rachel,
That's okay.
Nice to see you.
Thanks, Catherine. So Catherine, that was a really great transition in terms of what I'm going to talk about next. And so I know we're already over a little bit, so I am going to keep this even shorter than I had originally planned, as best as I could. So I'm going to talk to you guys briefly about a project we call MST-EA, which is Multisystemic Therapy for Emerging Adults. This is an ongoing project, so we don't have any analyses run. We're not looking at any qualitative data yet. This is really just these are the questions we asked, and this is what the young adults have said thus far. Going to the next one. Okay. So MST-EA is, it actually encompasses 2 randomized clinical trials that look at a psychosocial intervention. And the psychosocial intervention is an adaptation of multisystemic therapy, which is primarily for youth. And so this is an adaptation for young adults. The sample that we have in our 2 research studies are young adults ages 16 to 26. They have to have some sort of recent justice involvement, which was either an arrest or release from jail, detention, or prison within the last 18 months. So they have some sort of antisocial behavior or criminal activity recently. And they have to have a current mental health and or substance use disorder. And we are currently recruiting in Connecticut and Tennessee for these 2 clinical trials. And like Catherine said, once COVID started, we realized that we had a unique opportunity to actually ask the young adults in our sample about how the pandemic was impacting them. And our focus was really on the school and work life. So that's what I'm going to present to you guys here for a little bit. And we started asking these questions, I should mention, even though it's on the slide, in May 2020. So a little bit over a year. The 2 clinical trials are funded by the National Institute of Mental Health and the National Institute on Drug Abuse. We are actively recruiting for the drug abuse study still, but we stopped recruiting for the mental health study. What I did was, instead of keeping these 2 separate, I actually combined all of the answers of the young adults because they were pretty similar. And so combined, we have a sample of 348 young adults. In terms of their behavioral health conditions, again, combined, about 40% of them have some sort of mood disorder, like bipolar or major depressive disorder. 51% of them reported actually met criteria for anxiety disorder, whether it be generalized anxiety disorder or PTSD is pretty common with this group. And then 83% of them have some sort of substance use disorder. And again, that's over the 2 different clinical trials that we have. And then 76% of that 83 meet criteria for cannabis. So I did want to mention that it's mostly just cannabis that they're meeting criteria for. And then between the 2 studies, about 50% of the young adults has some sort of COVID comorbid, so a mental health and substance use diagnosis. Just to give you a flavor of what the sample is like. So in terms of the COVID-19 questions we asked questions again, as I mentioned, about school and work making money. We also asked questions about how they've been affected by COVID-19 and the pandemic themselves, and then about their household. So in terms of how they themselves have been affected, 3%, which is 5, reported actually being testing positive for COVID-19 since March 2020. And I looked at this since we had started, and we've done over 200 interviews since COVID started. So since we actually started asking the additional questions in May, and these were 5 unique youth. So it wasn't youth answering yes more than once. 9% of them described that they had to quarantine due to self-exposure, whether that self-exposure was from school or training program, or because of work, or just out in general in the community. And only 1 participant had to be hospitalized due to COVID-19. In terms of household, 4% of our young adults reported that someone within their household had been diagnosed with COVID-19 since March 2020, and that unlike the 9% who reported having to self-quarantine because they themselves were exposed, 4% reported that they had to do some sort of household quarantine, which was because one of their household members was exposed to COVID-19. 1 minute warning. It does go really fast, Melissa. All right. And then 17% reported some sort of disruption in work for someone in their household. They either lost their job, were furloughed, or their hours were reduced. Okay. So in terms of school, a lot of them mentioned technology issues. So a lot of the young adults didn't have access to the internet. They also didn't have access to a computer or a tablet, or if they did, they actually had to share that technology with others in the home. And as Catherine mentioned, in terms of learning environment, a lot of times they mentioned not enjoying this. Some actually mentioned they enjoyed it better because they got to learn at their own pace. A lot of times they mentioned that they had an inability to ask questions, therefore they didn't understand the material being covered. Some actually spoke to the interviewer and said that they were worried if they were actually going to pass the grade that they were currently in for the school year. And so it'll be interesting to see, actually, if we've got these young adults who reported being concerned about that, if they actually go on to the next grade. And we can ask that information during the follow-up interviews. And then just so that we can get to work making money, so we asked them if they've been looking for a job since COVID started, so since March. Some of them reported that it was difficult finding a job. They had to apply online. They didn't have an internet or a way to do that. Some mentioned that they were applying for jobs that so many other people were applying for because people were losing their jobs, so it was more competitive, not getting called back. And the places that they normally, this age group typically applies for jobs were fast food, retail, and they were not accepting applications because so many places were either shutting down or stopping hiring new people. And then in terms of their current job, if they already had a job once COVID started, a lot of people reported actually quitting their job because they were scared of getting sick. They didn't feel that the precautions at their job were of wearing masks and using other PPE equipment were good enough. They were still scared of getting it. Some reported not minding wearing masks and getting less hours at work. Some reported getting COVID pay, which they were really excited about. So they got an extra $200 in their check every single paycheck. And it was about 50-50 if you looked at whether or not they believed it to be their work situation was more stressful because of COVID. So again, we haven't done the analyses yet. This was just by me looking at the open-ended responses that we asked the young adults about, sorry. So in terms of next steps, we're going to be analyzing the data, looking more at their mental health and substance use and their changes in work and making money and also school to see if they actually did go on to the next grade or if they actually repeated a grade. So just very short, quick description.